Managing the offer is something that you've already been doing subtly throughout this entire step-by-step process. By this stage, you should have the information on the client's full salary and benefits package for this role, which would have been obtained as part of the job spec questions, identified your client's budget and whether there's any flexibility in this for exceptional candidates, understood your candidate's drivers for leaving their existing role and their expectations for their new role, and whether this opportunity meets them. This would have been covered as part of your sourcing and qualifying questions. Identified the candidate's notice period, including any flexibility in this. Also, you should have discussed details of any contractual obligations or restrictive covenants the candidate has. Ironed out any potential issues or obstacles in accepting the new role relating to location, working hours, start date, career progression and training, and any other benefits package. Each interview debrief would have covered any issues from either the candidate or the client on these areas. If you followed the steps thoroughly, all that remains is for you to negotiate the full package for your candidate before the client makes an offer in writing. Once the client has the offer in writing, they're less likely to budge if the candidate pushes for more. Make sure all of your candidate's boxes are ticked before your client issues an offer. This will simplify the process and ensure their expectations are met first time round. If all the boxes are ticked and the candidate has signed and accepted the offer, it's now time to agree a start date. This is a critical step in the offer process. Remember, the longer the notice period, the more vulnerable the candidate becomes. At this stage, you'll already be aware of your candidate's notice period and whether there's any flexibility in this. I've often found that longer notice periods can always be negotiated down. It's always in your interest to encourage the employee to begin the new role as soon as possible. This will help retain your relationship with the candidate. It also limits the opportunities for them to change their mind or be swayed to stay in their current role. If a start date has been agreed, you now need to help with the resignation process. It's important to have consistent communications with your candidate during this stage. Candidates can find it difficult to resign from a company they've enjoyed working at and can sometimes be persuaded to stay. That's why the counter-offer questions earlier on in this process are so important. Recruiting a new employee can cost as much as 75% of the candidate's salary. The recruitment fee alone could be 25% of the first year's salary, and it can take up to 6 months for a new employee to become productive. So if the candidate's employer is keen to keep hold of them, they will try and do their hardest to maintain them. To keep in control of the process, you need to support your candidate. I would always help to draft the resignation letter with the candidate. Once you've written a positive but firm draft, it will help to alleviate some of their stress during what is going to be a very stressful period. I would also arrange a phone call with my candidate before they hand in their notice. Use this time to remind them why they wanted to leave in the first place and what they liked about this new position. Remember, at this point in the process, you can still influence your candidate's decision. I would always remind my candidate they will get counter-offered. That way, if they do, they'll be ready to deal with the conversation. But even if they don't, it's best to prepare them for the worst so they can still handle it accordingly. In fact, if you always assume they'll be counter-offered, they'll probably be slightly put off if their existing employer doesn't counter-offer them. Then the resignation process will be even quicker and in your favour. Now arrange a call for after they've handed in their notice to ask how it went and to iron out any potential issues. Once you've made these initial phone calls, it's important to create a contact plan until your candidate starts their new role. Employers can use this period to convince your candidate to stay. Therefore, avoid any surprises. I strongly recommend you have weekly calls with the candidate to help avoid this. You can do this subtly through engaging in a friendly conversation and asking open-ended questions about their move. It's always good to have another reason to call. Maybe you want to tell them about changes or news in their industry. Or maybe you want to meet them for a drink to celebrate this new position. Either way, it's good to have a reason to stay in touch. Too many recruiters believe that their work is done once the candidate has resigned. But in my view, you're only halfway through the process. This period is when your placement is most vulnerable. By having a consistent communication, you are much more likely to find out about any issues and deal with them before hearing the candidate hasn't turned up on their first day.